Family meeting, Sunday, 3 p.m. That's all she sent. No greeting, no signature, no explanation. A curt message on the screen from someone who used to be my mother, now more like a commander issuing deployment orders. But this time it wasn't to a battlefield. It was to come home. I was standing in the kitchen of my small Portland apartment when it arrived. The hot tea in my hand stopped trembling only when I set it down on the table. I stared at the message longer than necessary, as if lingering long enough would transform it into a kinder invitation, or at least a question. Are you free? No such thing, just a command. I gave a faint laugh. How many years had it been since our family had a full gathering? Not counting my grandfather's funeral 3 weeks ago, because if that counts as a gathering, then a trench would be an ideal spot for family reunions. I'm Alexandra Grace Rowe, Alex to friends and comrades, former lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps. I returned after 8 years of service carrying a duffel bag, a clean record, and a mind accustomed to order, honor, and duty. But what I didn't bring back was preparation for the battlefield called family. If you ever thought serving your country made you immune to family mind games, you're mistaken. In the military, at least, the one shooting at you is the enemy. Here, they share your last name, your blood, and the same quiet resentment. The last time I saw my mother, Lillian Rowe, was at the funeral. She wore a tailored black silk dress, oversized sunglasses, and perfume so strong it overpowered the scent of pine in the cemetery. I vividly remember how she gripped my shoulder as if comforting me while her eyes scanned to see who was watching. Then came the cold hug. Lillian hugged everyone like that as if proving something to an invisible audience around her. Not a word of thanks for my coming to the funeral. Not a single question about how I was. No surprise there. We were never close, and after I enlisted, that distance was codified into silence. The only thing tying me to the name Rowe was my grandfather Edward, the only man who ever trusted me enough to hand me both the shed blueprints and the accounting ledger when I was just 15. I sat back at the dining table, eyes still fixed on the message. Part of me wanted to ignore it, delete it, block the group. But no, not for them, but for him. Because he would want me to show up and he'd never forgive me if I refused without facing them. Sunday at exactly 2:45 p.m., I parked in front of the old house in Salem. The same pale green shingles, the same unused wooden porch swing. The house looked unchanged, but I knew the real changes were always inside. The air was so still I could almost hear my own heartbeat as I stepped onto the porch. The door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there, her smile rehearsed in front of a mirror. "Alex, you're right on time." "Hi, Mom," I said, voice low and brief. Her old perfume lingered as if time froze every time she sprayed it. She stepped aside to let me in. The house inside was just as I remembered: polished wood floors, dark brown leather chairs, walls adorned with oil paintings, a museum of itself. But what stopped me wasn't the decor. It was how everyone was seated. The living room was arranged like a courtroom, chairs in a row, everyone sitting stiffly. Ethan, my younger brother, hands clasped, eyes red. Claire, my older sister, head bowed, not meeting my gaze, and 2 unfamiliar men in gray suits, folders neatly placed on the glass table. "Meet the family advisors," my mother said, her voice sweeter than usual. "They're here to help us, settle things smoothly." I looked at them. One nodded, stood, and offered a hand. I didn't take it. "I'm here for Grandpa." "Not for this performance." No one responded. The air thickened like wet dough. I pulled a chair, placed my leather document bag on my lap. "Let's get started," I said. "I don't plan to stay long. If you're thinking, why so tense? What's with the courtroom drama vibe? Imagine a soldier returning from a war zone only to find the real war waiting, at home." Lillian smiled as if nothing was amiss, twirling her antique gold ring. "You know your grandfather always wanted the family to stay united. We can find a solution if you open your heart a little." I gave a faint smile. Solution for what? She paused, glancing at the 2 lawyers. One opened his briefcase, pulling out documents. I didn't read them. I knew what was coming. "Mom thinks it'd be fairer if everyone shared what you received." The share Grandpa left, I looked straight at her. He chose clearly. No ambiguity. Claire shifted but said nothing. Ethan avoided my gaze. He was confused. "He was old," my mother blurted. "No one in their right mind would do that." I pulled a paper from my document bag. The day he signed the will, he called me over. We sat for hours discussing business. He wasn't confused. He was sharper than your entire marketing team. The corner of her mouth twitched. Her eyes shifted from feigned gentleness to resentment. But her voice stayed polite. "Then we can discuss it again, can't we?" I placed the paper down. "No, I didn't come to negotiate." The war hadn't started yet, but I could smell gunpowder in the air. Lillian stared at me. "You don't understand. This is for the family." I looked back at her, really looked, and saw only emptiness behind her made-up eyes. No, I understood more than she thought. And I knew this wasn't about family. It was about power, about control. I gripped the handle of my document bag. This war wouldn't be easy, but I wasn't turning back. Not this time. And I wasn't as alone as they thought. No one expected that day to become the moment that redefined my entire life. I thought I'd sit quietly, hear a few polite thank yous, receive some personal keepsakes Grandpa left behind, maybe his old pocket watch or his business journal from when he started out. But when the lawyer opened the leather folder and spoke, I knew something was about to shatter. The meeting room fell silent, so quiet I could hear the rustle of his papers. It took place in the wood-paneled office of Holbrook & Hartley, the firm where Grandpa signed dozens of contracts, and now where his name was read for the last time as a legal formality. "Let's begin," Mr. Holbrook said, his voice steady like someone who'd seen too many tragedies unfold through paperwork. The will was last updated 6 months ago, legally notarized with no disputes regarding mental capacity at the time of signing. I listened but didn't really hear. All I could think was Grandpa did this deliberately. 6 months ago, the time I was on leave, the last time I sat with him in his study drinking black coffee and talking about expanding the factory eastward. I remembered him holding some papers then, but I never imagined. And the entirety of the remaining estate, including but not limited to shares in Rowe. Timber Solutions investment accounts, real estate, and personal belongings shall be transferred solely to his granddaughter, Alexandra Grace Rowe. The words hit like thunder in the room. One beat, then two. Then something dropped, maybe Ethan's pen. I didn't dare look at my brother. But I caught my mother's dramatic inhale, as if she'd been punched in the gut. What Lillian nearly shouted, dropping her usual poised facade. "Read it again. Read it clearly. Mrs. Rowe." Mr. Holbrook remained calm. I read it correctly. The document states all unallocated assets are to go to Alexandra. Claire, sitting beside my mother, didn't say a word, staring down at her clasped hands. That expression, I'd seen it in the mirror as a teenager. The look of someone trying not to break in front of a crowd. Ethan turned to me, eyes wide, not yet angry, but lost in confusion. I didn't know what to feel. At that moment, I felt empty. As if I wasn't in this polished meeting room, but watching it from afar through bulletproof glass, unable to touch reality. Part of me whispered he trusted me that much. Another part colder, and the family will never forgive me. If you've ever been in a situation where a loved one left you everything, and the rest of the family looked at you like a traitor, you'd understand. If you've been there, share it in the comments. Not to vent, but to show that sometimes doing the right thing makes others hate you. "No," my mother said, her face pale with fury. "It can't be like this. He'd never play favorites." "Mrs. Lillian," Mr. Holbrook said gently but firmly. I worked directly with Mr. Edward on this final update. He was fully lucid and very clear about his wishes. "You don't have the right to keep it all. Alex!" My mother turned to me, her voice losing its polish cold as steel. "That's family property, ours. Not just yours." I didn't respond. I didn't argue, didn't agree. I knew anything I said would be twisted, misunderstood. I stayed silent. And in that silence, I scanned the room, seeing every expression clearly Ethan's helplessness. Claire's excessive silence, and my mother's resentment not born of grief, but of losing control. The meeting ended without another word. Mr. Holbrook handed me a copy of the documents and asked all parties to sign acknowledging receipt. I signed steady, expressionless. A soldier trained to sign orders under falling bombs. This was nothing. I walked out to the parking lot. Portland was colder than usual that afternoon. Weak sunlight filtered through gray clouds, casting light on my car's windshield. As I opened the door, a shadow appeared behind me. My mother. "Alex," she said, no longer angry but not kind either. Her voice was careful, like an actress playing a wise mother on a Broadway stage. I turned. "What, Mom?" "We don't need to make this difficult," she said, clutching her cream-colored clutch. "You sign the papers. Transfer some assets to a shared fund. I'll distribute fairly. Everyone will be taken care of. The family won't fall apart." I gave a faint smile. When did it fall apart, Mom? When Grandpa left the company to me or before that. She didn't smile. You'll understand when you have kids. Blood responsibility. No one should keep everything alone. I stepped back. He didn't leave it to me to keep everything. He left it because he knew I'd protect it. Her face changed. Her expression cracked for a moment. I saw it, the hurt, or at least the sting of wounded pride, but she pulled herself together, straightening her shoulders. Think of Ethan. He needs college. Claire's still in debt. We're a family, Alex. Family doesn't start with dividing spoils. Mom? I opened the car door. I'll think about it, but I'm not promising anything. She didn't say more. Just stood there watching me. Her eyes weren't angry, weren't sad. They were empty. I got in, closed the door. My heart heavy. Not because of what I received, but because I knew from now on, those who once called me daughter-sister kin would look at me differently. The eyes of those who saw me as an obstacle, a threat, and I wondered, how long until they strike? The first message came at 6 a.m. on Monday. Francine Jensen here, your mom's high school friend. Shocked to hear the news. Hope you'll reconsider for family's sake. It took me a few seconds to recall who Francine was. I think she made lemon bars for a school fair when I was in 6th grade. She didn't specify what news meant, didn't ask how I was. Just advised me to reconsider. The 2nd, 3rd, and 7th messages arrived that day. All from names I didn't have saved or had long forgotten. The tone was the same shock disappointment mention of family ending with vague, loaded advice. By evening, I had to put my phone on Do Not Disturb, but even that didn't stop Ethan's message at 1:43 a.m. Just one word. Why? I stared at the screen. No question mark, no greeting, nothing but those 3 hollow syllables. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I knew he wasn't ready for the truth. Claire didn't message, didn't call, didn't ask. Just maintained a dense silence like a velvet curtain hiding her thoughts. Of all the reactions, Claire's silence hurt the most. My mother, of course, didn't apply pressure directly. She didn't need to. She let her emotional propaganda army do the work, old friends, relatives I hadn't seen since puberty neighbors, who once asked for her lentil soup recipe. Each sent a small message dripping with morality and guilt. We always admired you, Alex. Your grandfather was a noble man. You don't want to go against his wishes. You're a soldier. You understand sacrifice, don't you? Strange. When I left home to enlist, none of them sent a single letter. No one asked if I was safe, lonely, or caught in gunfire, wondering if I'd make it back. But now, because I was the legal heir to a will, they suddenly remembered me. I'm not easily hurt. The military taught me to control emotions, to keep a clear head under pressure. But being surrounded not by real bullets, but by orchestrated disappointment, I started to feel lost. I sat alone in my small kitchen, warm, yellow light. My tea, long cold. Logan, my boyfriend, came home from work. He set his bag down, looked at me for a moment, then asked softly, "More messages?" I nodded. Like a public trial, and no one cares about the full story. He poured water, sat beside me. You need help. A lawyer. Someone who knows these games. I stayed quiet. I wasn't ready to bring the law into this, not yet. Because I still held a sliver of hope that my family wouldn't be that bad. I know someone, Logan continued. Andrea Pierce, law school friend. Now a trusts and estates lawyer. Not aggressive, but smart, straightforward. And very good. I looked at him, part of me wanting to refuse. But I knew if I didn't prepare, if I kept believing family ties were enough, I was walking into a trap. Okay, I said. Give her my number. Her Logan corrected. Andrea's a woman. I gave a small laugh. Good. Women often spot other women's tricks faster than men. We met Andrea 3 days later in a small office above a flower shop in Alberta. Not a glossy mahogany and leather setup, just a bright space full of plants, a rough wooden desk, and a slanting bookshelf stuffed with highlighters. Andrea was in her 30s, hair neatly tied, dressed simply, but sharply. She didn't shake hands formally, just nodded, and invited me to sit, her eyes scanning quickly, but without judgment. I told her everything, no detail spared. The meeting, my mother's reaction, Claire's silence, Ethan's quiet confusion. Then the wave of messages calls pressure from the sidelines. Andrea didn't take many notes. She just listened. Intently. When I finished, she crossed her arms, leaned back. Classic, she said. I frowned. Classic. Manipulation tactics in will disputes, Andrea said. First is shock. They apply emotional pressure through close social networks. Next is persuasion, soft appeals to family values, sacrifice tradition. If both fail, phase 3, direct attack, including legal action. I clenched my hands lightly. They haven't hit phase 3. Andrea nodded. Then you're in phase 2. In my experience, it lasts 1 or 2 weeks before phase 3 begins. She pulled a folder from a cabinet and opened it in front of me. Now's the time to prepare. What do I need to do? Document everything. Messages, emails, calls, meetings. Note times, content your reactions. The smallest details are often the strongest evidence if they take it to court. I nodded, slow but firm. I knew a battlefield when I saw one. And this was when I needed to draw my lines. Andrea looked at me, her eyes sharp as a scalpel. And one key thing, don't sign anything, even what they call a temporary agreement. Those are often traps. I stood, shook her hand. Thanks, Andrea. She smiled. Don't thank me. Thank your grandfather for believing you wouldn't buckle under pressure. On the way home, I put my phone on airplane mode. I didn't need more messages tonight. Instead, I sat in my car writing in my notebook dates, times, senders, message contents. Carefully, line by line. An anonymous email, if it arrives at midnight, would usually make me suspect spam, or worse, a phishing scam. But this one came at 8 a.m. just as I finished brewing coffee and was about to sit down to continue my notes per Andrea's advice. The subject was simple to Alex. The truth may not be spoken aloud. No sender name, just a random email address, truthsender ezono9e protonmail.com. I opened it cautiously. Below the subject were a few brief lines. The attached file will answer what you need to know. Don't trust everything they say about family. People don't always keep clean hands when greed touches blood. Below was a PDF row, financial 2019-2020 Odazus internal.pdf. I hesitated for a few seconds, then opened it in safe mode. An internal report appeared over 20 pages. Alongside spreadsheets were scanned handwritten notes, bank account details, and descriptions of suspicious withdrawals. $30,000 from a scholarship fund transferred to an account under Lillian Rowe's name. Note, advance for Ethan's tuition. I frowned. I knew Ethan never went to college. He dropped out to work at a computer store, then went freelance. But that wasn't the most shocking part. Page 8 showed a bank statement detailing an $18,700 transfer to a Caribbean travel company, Shoreline Voyages, timed exactly when Ethan was supposedly enrolled. An attached photo. My mother in a maxi dress, oversized sunglasses, standing on a yacht deck, cocktail in hand, with an old Facebook caption, "Rest is medicine for the soul. Cause there's self-care, blessed." I didn't know what to feel then. Angry, no. I was too used to backstabs to get angry. Hurt, not quite. I thought I'd learned to close the emotional door on my mother long ago. What I felt was confirmation. An empty but clear sensation, as if someone had handed me a puzzle piece I always knew existed, but hadn't seen. I sent the file to Andrea with a simple note. "Verify this for me. Need to know if it's real." Less than an hour later, she called back. "This isn't just real," she said. "It's the kind of evidence that makes a court sit up and take notice. Legally usable. Not yet. But if they sue you or you sue them, it's invaluable. Not just for the numbers, but for the hidden intent." I closed my eyes. "I want to know who sent it." Andrea sighed lightly. "No trace. They used an IP masking service. Not an amateur. I knew that. And I also knew someone in the family was on my side quietly." I started thinking. Not Ethan. He was still confused, even hurt. Definitely not my mother. That left Claire. Her, the one who'd been silent from start to finish. Not a word of criticism, not a look of open support. But also not joining the siege against me. Claire was the smartest in our family, the one who could balance a household budget at 16, who once managed a small college charity fund. If anyone could access Grandpa's old internal financial systems, it was her. But if it was Claire, why hide her identity? I remembered a night from childhood, when I was scolded for spilling wine on the carpet. Claire took the blame, then said to me, "You don't need to know why I did it. Just know someone's standing between you and the axe." That feeling of someone quietly shielding me from venom was back, but I wasn't sure. And I knew if I confronted her, Claire would deny it. Maybe to protect herself, or maybe to protect me. I decided to stay silent. Andrea texted again. "Start documenting old financials too. There might be a pattern." I reopened Rowe Timber's old invoices. Looked through Grandpa's notebook I brought back from the funeral. Beneath his neat handwriting, a familiar note. To Lillian, $20,000, said it was for Claire's dental work. Saw Claire that day. No change. A chill ran down my spine. Once again, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. Each of Grandpa's notes was a warning sent back from the past. Not because he hated my mother, but because he knew I'd need the truth to protect what he left behind, not just money, but honor. That night, I sat alone in my apartment. Portland's light rain tapped the windows like the quiet drumbeat of something yet to come. I looked outside, tea in hand, thinking of two words: insider and loyalty. I didn't know if Claire was truly the one who sent the email, but I knew one thing in this battlefield: I was no longer an easy target. I knew where the shots were coming from. I closed my laptop, added a few lines to my investigation journal. The list of questions grew longer. Who's really behind the email? Is their goal to help me or push me to act? What else is Claire hiding? I didn't need answers yet. I just needed to be ready. In a war zone, I learned one thing earlier than any training. It's not the sound of bullets that panics you. It's the silence before. When everything goes too quiet, the wind stops. Leaves don't rustle the ground. Doesn't shake your heart, slows. That's when you know something's coming. I was living that silence again, not in Fallujah or Kandahar, but in my small Portland apartment in a city that seemed safe. A false calm blanketed everything like a thick, warm, stifling quilt, and I knew the storm was circling back. Since the anonymous email, I was no longer just a passive recipient of messages. I became a collector, a reviewer, an organizer of the battlefield. Every morning I spent 3 hours sorting documents, one set on paper, one digitized, one encrypted separately. All clearly labeled financial evidence manipulation messages, Grandpa's notes, internal communications. Andrea would be proud of this system. But I wasn't doing it for praise, I was doing it because I knew an attack was coming. No one told me to do this. No orders. But military habits were in my blood. When you've mapped a route for a unit through a minefield, organizing a few folders of evidence isn't hard. The harder part was the emotions, and I forced myself to keep them at their lowest. Claire called 3 days after I received the documents. The call came at 7:12 p.m. when she knew I'd be home. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. "It's me," Claire said, not beating around the bush, but not direct either. "You okay?" I paused for a few seconds before answering. "Fine, and busy." She gave a small laugh, not a happy one. "You're always straight to the point. Still a true Marine." I didn't respond. I waited. She knew it. And after a few awkward seconds of silence, Claire continued. "I think you probably feel like everyone's being unfair. Depends on your definition of unfair," I said, voice as even as a weather report. "I don't agree with how Mom's handling this," Claire said, keeping her tone light. "But I also get that she's scared. She's not used to losing." "She hasn't lost," I replied. "She just doesn't get what she's not entitled to." Claire didn't argue. She just said, "If you need to talk, call me. It doesn't have to be public." I knew what she meant. Not explicit, but not hidden either. She knew more than she let on. Maybe she was the one who sent the email. We ended the call with a mechanical good night. But I knew from now on I had to watch closer because in this battlefield, true allies didn't wear badges. The next evening, Ethan texted, "You free to talk?" I felt a spark of relief. My brother was finally reaching out. I replied immediately. "Free. Meet or call?" Ethan responded. "Meet's better. In person." We agreed on a small cafe near our old school where we used to drink hot cocoa after snowball fights as kids. I arrived 15 minutes early, ordered 2 drinks like old times, waited. 15 minutes, then 30, then 50. Ethan didn't show. I checked my phone. One message sent at 7:46. "Sorry, can't make it. Don't be mad." No reason, no explanation, no rescheduling. I put my phone away watching the cocoa cool on the table and realized some battles you have to fight alone, even when you desperately want someone by your side. Ethan wasn't ready. Or maybe he'd never be brave enough. And I couldn't blame him, not everyone's trained to stand in front of fire. I got home late just hanging up my coat when my phone buzzed. A message from Mom. I hesitated but read it. "Sunday 3 p.m. Let's settle this like adults." No greeting, no plea, no question. Just a command. And a line so typical of her. Settle this like adults. I wasn't sure she understood what adult really meant. Adults don't manipulate, don't hide, don't maneuver behind backs. Adults talk. Adults take responsibility. I reread the message, didn't reply. Then opened my new notebook, flipped to a blank page and wrote clearly at the top, Sunday, 3 p.m., no backing down. When I was in the military, they used to say, "No battle is truly easy. Only those prepared so well, they don't fear breathing deeply." I was prepared. But my heart still beat faster than usual as my car turned onto the brick-paved road leading to the old house in Salem. Autumn wind whistled through the maple trees, carrying a few early fallen red leaves. Oregon's sky was gray and cold, but the house before me was colder. Not for lack of warmth, but because warmth hadn't been real here for a long time. I stepped onto the porch at 2:59 p.m., right on my watch. The front door opened before I could knock. My mother, Lillian Rowe, stood there with the smile I'd seen in countless charity gala photos, a smile that never reached her eyes. Her hair was meticulously styled. Her cream blazer fitted her pointed heels sparkling with rhinestones. I wasn't sure if she was preparing for a family meeting or a campaign rally. "Right on time," she said, as if I were an honored guest 5 minutes late. "I'm always on time for a summons," I replied, voice steady. She leaned aside to let me in, her classic perfume clinging to the air, a scent of power mixed with less than pleasant memories. The living room was set up like a hearing room. Chairs arranged in a semicircle, one solitary chair facing them. On the table before me was a stack of documents, a fountain pen neatly placed. Lillian sat in the center like a judge. Ethan to her left, Claire to her right. Near the fireplace were 2 men in suits, not my lawyers. I guessed they were hers. "Alex," she began, eyes bright, but voice soft as fog. "This is Mr. Hale and Mr. Darnell. They're here to help us reach a peaceful resolution." "Lawyers," I asked, though I knew the answer. "Family advisors," she corrected, but one of the men nodded in confirmation. I didn't shake hands. I pulled the solitary chair, placed my document bag on my lap, and nodded. "Let's start. I won't stay long." Hale spoke first. "We understand you're the sole heir to Edward Rowe's estate, but the family hopes to reach a fair redistribution agreement based on unity and sharing." "He left a clear will," I said. "No clause about sharing per outside opinions." "We understand," Darnell said, "which is why we propose a goodwill redistribution agreement." Lillian placed her hand on the folder. "Alex, you'll still keep the majority 20%, enough to live comfortably. The rest I'll help allocate fairly to Ethan, Claire, and a charity in Grandpa's name." I didn't touch the folder. "I don't need 20%, I said slowly. "I need the truth upheld. And he didn't leave the estate to me out of pity. He trusted me to preserve what he built." Claire lowered her head slightly. Ethan looked out the window. Only my mother held my gaze tightly, the eyes of someone who still didn't believe she could lose. I opened my bag, pulled out a thin folder. "If we're really aiming for transparency, let's start with some financials." I handed over a bank statement, $30,000 withdrawn from Ethan's tuition fund. "This was explained as tuition," I said, voice even. "But the statement shows it went to a Florida travel agency. That month, Mom posted photos from a cruise." Lillian opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. "This is the second one." I continued, pulling another sheet. $18,700 listed as medical expenses for Claire. But Claire's Instagram from that day shows her in Scottsdale, a 5-day spa retreat. No one spoke. No more denials. I looked at Ethan, saw him flinch, as if pulled from the world he used to trust. He knew I went on. He documented everything. Notes, recordings, receipts. Because he knew this day would come. I pulled out one final paper, his handwritten note. "To Lillian, 20K said, for Ethan's education. But Ethan's not in school. Called to check. Said she's on a retreat. Disappointed." I didn't need to say more. Didn't need to shout. Didn't need to cry. I just placed the papers on the table and sat still. That silence weighed 1,000 times heavier than any argument. Lillian stood abruptly. Her chair creaked. "You're digging through a dead man's notebook to smear your own mother," she hissed. "Despicable." I looked straight at her. "I'm protecting his memory. The Rowe name isn't worth anything if it's built on lies." The air froze. Then suddenly Claire broke into tears. Not sobbing, not dramatic. Just quiet tears streaming down. "Let me speak," she whispered, voice choked. "Please, let me speak." The entire room turned to her. I looked at Claire and saw no trace of her usual mask. Just a woman who'd been silent too long, clinging to her last shred of conscience. The silence after Claire's words wasn't like any I'd experienced. It wasn't just the gap between one sound and the next. It was anticipation. The held breath of a room heavy with unspoken truths. "Let me speak," Claire repeated, clearer, firmer. Her eyes were still red, her voice trembled, but something in her gaze had shifted. Something almost brave. I nodded. Though no one else spoke, I felt the entire room watching her, even Mom. Claire took a deep breath, placed her hands on her thighs, and began with exactly what I didn't expect to hear. "It was me." Lillian frowned. "It was you." "What?" "I sent the email," Claire said, unwavering. "The documents, the report, the bank statement photos. It was me." I didn't react. I just looked. Not surprised. Not relieved. But deep in my chest, something warmed like an old wound touched not to hurt, but to acknowledge its existence. "I've known for a long time," Claire continued, "about the misused funds, the times Mom used Ethan's name, my name, Grandpa's name, to borrow, to ask to spend. You're right, Alex. Mom's so good at weaving stories that even I believed them once." Lillian stood, eyes blazing. "Claire, what the hell are you saying? I raised you all single-handedly for years." "Not single-handedly," Mom Claire interrupted for the first time. "With Grandpa's money, his kindness, and you never knew when to stop." Ethan looked up. I saw his eyes glisten. "What?" Claire turned to her brother. You didn't know. I don't blame you. But you were used, Ethan. Your name was the excuse for taking money tuition cars, hospital bills while you got nothing. Mom didn't use it for you. She used it to live the life she wanted. I thought I was protecting something," she went on slower now. "Staying silent, playing the middle ground, pretending it was fine. But then I saw you, Ethan, getting more confused, not knowing right from wrong. And I realized my silence was hurting you." The room was deathly still. No one moved. Even Mom, the one always quick to justify control redirect, couldn't muster a word. Claire turned her gaze to me. No apology needed. But in that look, I saw a full confession that she'd been jealous, resented me, thought I was unfairly favored. But she also understood that Grandpa's trust wasn't a gift. It was a reward for years of his observation judgment and betting on someone unshakable. "I'm not sure I'm a good person," Claire said softly. "But at least I don't want to stay silent anymore." I nodded faintly, like a soldier agreeing to shake hands with someone from the other side. Not victory, not defeat, just mutual understanding. I didn't look at Ethan until he stood. His chair made a small clatter. I looked up. Ethan stood there, eyes red, hands gripping the chair. "Mom," he started but couldn't continue. He turned to Claire, then to me. "I didn't know." "I know," I said. "Now you do." Ethan exhaled sharply. "At first I thought you took everything, that you wanted to dominate control. But now I see. Grandpa gave it to you not because you were his favorite, but because you were the only one who didn't exploit him." Lillian stepped back. "Ethan, you can't." "No, Mom," Ethan cut her off. "You always said it was for family, but now I see you just wanted to control everyone." His voice shook, but it was firm. I'd never seen Ethan like this. He was always the one to avoid, to shrink behind others. But now he stood tall, looked at me and said, "I'm on your side." I didn't smile, but something inside me released. Not victory. Just a light breath, like someone opening a window after days of trapped air. I stood. The room remained silent. Lillian sank back into her chair, her face drained as if bloodless. "Thank you," I said to Ethan, then turned to Claire. "Thank you for speaking, and for choosing the right moment." Claire only nodded slightly, saying nothing more. I picked up my document bag, my eyes sweeping over the 2 advisors Mom hired, now sitting still as statues. They knew the battle had turned. I turned and walked out, my heart not light, but steady. I knew I hadn't won, but I knew I wasn't fighting alone anymore. There's a kind of silence that doesn't weigh on you. It comes when you've said all that needs saying, when nothing's left to hide, when masks have fallen and you no longer need to guess who's friend or foe. I left my childhood home in that silence, no shouting, no yelling, no one running after me to come back. And I understood this was no longer a war. This was a moment of transition between power and responsibility. Ethan walked beside me, saying nothing. We stepped slowly down the wooden porch, past the dusty swing to the front yard. Logan was waiting in the car, but didn't rush out. He knew I needed a moment to breathe. "You okay?" Ethan asked so softly I almost didn't hear. I turned to my brother, the boy who once curled up on the sofa playing superhero with an old t-shirt. Now standing before me, shoulders slumped but eyes resolute. "Not okay," I said honestly, "but steady." Andrea came to my place the next morning. She didn't need an appointment. I'd texted her the night before, need to meet tomorrow. Need a solution. We sat by the kitchen window, morning light slanting onto white ceramic coffee mugs. Andrea didn't say much, just opened her bag and placed a draft in front of me with a bold title, Row Resilience Trust, Family Support Fund. I frowned. I didn't say I wanted to redistribute assets. "It's not redistribution," she said. "It's conditional allocation. This lets you hold your principles but doesn't slam the door shut. You're not giving money, you're giving opportunity. And whether they take it is up to them." I flipped through the pages. Andrea had prepared it. Each person, Ethan, Claire, even Mom, would have a small fund dispersed only when they met specific conditions. Ethan had to submit semester transcripts, participate in at least one community activity. Claire could withdraw funds for her daughter's medical care, not personal spending. Lillian would only receive support if she proved it was for charitable or community contributions. I closed the document, leaned back. "Is this too soft?" Andrea looked at me, eyes serious, but not harsh. The opposite. "This is the strongest control because it comes from choice, not possession. You're giving them a chance to do right. If they fail, it's on them, not you." I stayed silent for a long time. My heart hadn't softened. The echoes of years ignored Mom's judgmental looks, Claire's quiet envy, Ethan's earlier disappointment all still lingered. I didn't forget, and I didn't plan to, but I remembered something Grandpa said when I was furious about a teammate's betrayal in Iraq. Trust isn't forgetting. It's putting your hands in the mud and choosing to plant seeds instead of throwing it away. I hadn't forgotten, but I chose to plant. "Do it," I said, voice firmer than ever. "Set up the fund. With conditions, with clauses. No compromises, but not heartless." Andrea nodded. "You'll be the sole administrator. Every disbursement will have independent verification. You retain the right to close the fund if there's a violation." I signed the draft. Just then my phone buzzed. A message from Claire. "Thank you for not turning your back on me, even when I turned mine on you." I didn't reply right away. But I knew she knew. And I knew, though, she hadn't said sorry. Claire had taken the longest step she could. Ethan texted late that night. "If you need help with the business later, I want to learn. Really learn. I don't want to live off Grandpa's name anymore." I held the phone for a long time, then replied, "You get one chance. One. Not a threat, a deal." The next morning I sent the official trust document to each family member, with one attached message. "I'm not dividing assets. I'm dividing responsibility. Use your share to prove Grandpa wasn't wrong to call us all family." I didn't expect gratitude. I didn't need it. I just wanted them to understand nothing is given. It's earned if they're worthy. I didn't expect replies. When I sent the Row Resilience Trust document, I didn't include a call for reconciliation. No looking forward to your response, no stay well or take care. I sent it like a night watchman, placing the key back at the old house's door and walking away without looking back. But replies came each in their own way. My mother, unsurprisingly, was first, not through a text or email. She called, and left a nearly 3-minute voicemail. I sat and listened to it all, no skipping, no stopping. "Alexandra," she began, her voice sharp as a cold knife. "You think this is noble. A fund with conditions. You're playing a control game, just in legal language. You're not sharing anything. You're controlling. And if you think I'll beg for money from my own daughter, you've underestimated me." I didn't respond. Didn't reply. I knew she didn't expect an answer. She just needed to hear her own voice. Like a conductor unable to stand still when the orchestra no longer plays her tune. Claire was different. She didn't message right away, but 3 days later I got an email, 2 lines. "Submitted Abby's medical confirmation. Thank you for thinking of her before I did." Attached was a bank statement from a pediatric orthopedic clinic. I knew Abby, my niece, had been diagnosed with mild scoliosis since kindergarten, but Claire never had the funds for long-term treatment. Now, for the first time, she used her share to cover bills without worrying about credit cards. No fanfare needed, no trumpets. But in me, something softened, like a background song paused mid-note, now playing again. Ethan emailed a week later, brief. I re-enrolled in school, civil engineering. Also applied for a summer internship. Don't expect me to be as good as Grandpa, but I'll try not to let him down. I printed that email, folded it, and tucked it into Grandpa's notebook. Below his line, "Ethan lacks direction but not potential." I thought if Grandpa were alive, he wouldn't say much. He'd just nod, tell Ethan to grab tools from the shed and get to work. That was his highest praise. One Saturday afternoon, I was at my usual downtown cafe laptop, open trust papers spread out, when Logan walked in, holding a folded newspaper. He sat across from me, placed the paper on the table, and flipped to the local news section, then pointed to a black and white photo. I looked, and held my breath for a beat. Lillian, my mother, standing beside a relief truck, handing a box to a silver-haired woman. The headline below: Local woman once embroiled in controversy, raises large fund for South Salem fire victims. Logan said nothing. He let me read she'd raised nearly $10,000 using her share from the fund I allowed for community work, not because I forced her, but because she had to choose use it correctly or get nothing. And she chose. I didn't know what drove her. Maybe social pressure, maybe pride, maybe a small part of her wanted Grandpa's forgiveness, even if he was gone. I folded the paper, set it on my lap, looked out the window where the afternoon light cast a pale gold over the rain-damp street. "You okay?" Logan asked, his voice low, as if afraid to disturb what was settling in me. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him, then nodded, faintly smiling. "Okay," I said. Not the okay I used to think of, but enough to keep going. If you've ever seen people you thought would never change, take a step, even a small one, toward better, you'd know why that moment needs no fireworks or grand soundtrack. Just a nod, a smile, and a, "all right, let's keep going." That night I sat alone in my apartment's soft yellow light laptop, glowing like a beacon in the dark sea. I opened the Row Timber restructuring plan file. For the first time, it didn't feel like a burden, but a door. Some places you can close your eyes and still know the smell. The scent of old dust-yellowed paper pine wood steeped in damp air. It doesn't fade, doesn't blend anywhere else, no matter how many seasons pass. And that afternoon, when I turned the key in the lock of Grandpa's house the first time since the funeral, the first feeling that washed over me wasn't fear, wasn't nostalgia. It was a lump in my throat. I stepped inside. The house was quiet, as if the world had stopped when he left. The curtains hung as they always had, his coat still on the hook by the door, the family photo frame neatly placed on the old wooden cabinet. Everything in its place, as if he'd return tonight, take off his coat, pour a cup of tea, and ask me about Portland's weather. I walked through the familiar hallway, lightly touching the walls to make sure this wasn't a dream. His study was still at the end of the left hallway, the oak door slightly ajar as if inviting me in, and I stepped inside. The room still smelled of pine and old paper. The redwood desk, the curved brass reading lamp, the bookshelf reaching the ceiling, with shelves organized in a system only he understood. I stood still, didn't turn on the light, didn't open the window. I just let the late-day light filter through the thin curtains, casting a gentle, hazy glow over the dust. On the desk was the brown leather notebook. I recognized it instantly. He carried that notebook everywhere, to the office, the lumber yard, even the hospital when his health declined. He wrote everything in it: schedules, notes, business plans, book quotes, and sometimes his private thoughts. I sat in his chair, placed both hands on the notebook. My heart slowed. Then I opened it. The first page bore his familiar handwriting. Only those who know silence can understand where the most important sound comes from. I turned the pages. The next were lists of unfinished company projects, supplier meeting schedules, ideas for a green product line he could never convince the board to approve. Then I reached the back, where he wrote more personal entries. A bold heading, family. Below it, each name with a passage. Lillian great at persuading, but lacks a stopping point. Loves attention more than sustainability. Claire sensitive but hides it. Needs someone to believe in her potential before she does. Ethan kind-hearted. Torn between two kinds of people. If guided right, he'll become steady. And finally, Alexandra. Doesn't need to be loved. She needs to be understood. And if she leads with her heart, the company can outlive me. I looked up, eyes stinging. I didn't cry, at least not until I read that last line. He understood me. Not through words, not with overly warm hugs or grand gestures. He observed, listened, remembered, and he left me what few leave each other: recognition. I held the notebook to my chest as if I could hear his heartbeat again, and for the first time since he passed, I broke down, not out of regret, but because finally I didn't have to pretend to be strong anymore. I wiped my tears, stood, and took the notebook with me as I left the room. The afternoon light had shifted, but I knew from today this place was no longer a house of memories. It was the start of the next chapter. I stood at the Row Timber gate in early March, still holding Grandpa's brown leather notebook. The factory's corner had been renovated, preserving its old shape but adding solar panels on the roof. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Ethan stood by a newly bought small truck, holding design plans for a new eco-friendly workshop. He wore safety glasses, still a bit awkward, but more reliable than ever. When he looked up and saw me, he raised a hand in a small wave. A simple gesture, no words. Claire was in the marketing room, her laptop open to Row Timber's new fan page Green Wood, Sustainable Building Future. She no longer bore the marks of a woman caught between mother and daughter, but looked like a mother reflecting her own change. I didn't let Mom join the board directly. That was still too far for me. But when she emailed to join community projects, I agreed. Part of me was still wary, but another part understood some people only change when you offer inclusion over confrontation. We slowly refined the system. Improved production lines made mistakes, but no one pointed fingers. In one internal meeting, when Ethan accidentally sent a client email to a supplier, the team just laughed and helped him fix it. No one walked away. No one left anyone behind. Then that day came. I invited everyone, Claire, Ethan, Mom, and Logan, to the Row Timber office. Green tea was warmed with a few cookies Ethan baked himself. They came. One by one, pausing at the door, then stepping inside together. Mom wore a light coat, looking as if she might leave any moment. Claire opened the door, soft-spoken. I brought some nut jam. Ethan grinned. I got a new tea blend. We sat around a round table, no one vying, no one clashing. Logan poured the tea. As the warmth spread through the wooden cups, I knew this wasn't the end, but the start of something close to right. And if you've ever rekindled a fire with those who once shut you out, yelled, or left cracks in your heart, tell me. What was it like that first time opening the door to sit together again? Because sometimes a hot cup of tea is the start of rebuilding a family. I opened Grandpa's notebook again on the 1-year anniversary of the will reading. My pen glided on the paper, writing on the last page, "This isn't to end. This is to begin." I was never a journaler. In the military, everything went into reports, no emotions, no guesses. But something about this morning's silence, the distant hum of saws, the familiar scent of pine resin made me want to write like he did. His old words were still there, ink darkening, then fading with time. But the emotions never faded. He didn't just leave me a company. He left a promise written in short, unadorned lines. Alex doesn't need to be loved, she needs to be understood. And if she leads with her heart, the company can outlive me. I'd read that dozens of times. But this morning, for the first time, I truly believed he was right. And for the first time, I felt ready to live for it. Logan stepped into the office. He didn't say anything, just placed a coffee mug beside me. At the bottom was a small, folded note. I opened it. One line. "When you're ready, we'll build something together." I looked up at him. No ring, no kneeling, no roses. But I understood, and I nodded. It wasn't a classic proposal, but it was the most honest commitment I'd ever received. No strings, no conditions. Just companionship, and for me, that was enough. I left the office and stepped onto the second-floor balcony of the main building. From here, I could see most of the factory neatly stacked lumber solar panel-covered roofs, workers in green shirts moving rhythmically in the morning light. The sign above the main gate still bore the wrought iron words, "Row Timber," since 1974. Sunlight slanted across, illuminating each letter as if reigniting an old flame. I used to think I kept the company for his wishes, for duty. But now I understood I kept it for something else. I kept it for Ethan, who was slowly becoming a reliable man, steady if slow. For Claire, who tried daily to make up for years of silence. For Mom, who never apologized but was finding ways to show it through action. I kept it for the workers who still called Grandpa the kindest man who ever signed their paychecks. For the recycled wood designs. For every tree replanted after being cut. And finally, I kept it for me. For the girl who stood in the winter cemetery last year, hands stiff in her military coat pockets, thinking she was alone. I placed Grandpa's notebook back in the drawer. I didn't need to write more. Not because the story was over, but because I'd lived in it long enough to believe it was continuing. And in the final moment before heading downstairs for the week's new meeting, I whispered in my mind words I should have said years ago. "You left me the company, but what you really left was a reason to keep it." Thank you, Grandpa. And thank you, me, for not letting go. This story, though, filled with turmoil and pain, isn't about inheritance or assets. It's about choice. I chose not to respond with hatred, but with boundaries and compassion. I learned that family isn't always a given. It's something to be rebuilt sometimes from fragments. And if you're brave enough to forgive, strong enough to hold fast to what's right, even the deepest cracks can become places where light slips through. If you've ever stood between family and yourself, been misunderstood, or pushed aside for living true to your conscience, know you're not alone. Leave a comment, share your story. Maybe what you say will be a foothold for someone out there. If my journey resonates with you, follow the channel to join me in more stories of resilience, forgiveness, and the quiet strength of someone who doesn't choose to shine, but to stand firm. Thank you for staying until the very end.